So as always, we're going to start off with attribution. Our verification was 41.6 HDDs. This is our first verified HDD forecast that you guys made back on October 5th. Most of you did pretty well. I think we have, yeah, all positive scores. So that's, or mostly positive scores. Um, so that's good. Good job, everyone. Taking a look at a couple of our top performers, five guys, Lawrence Savoy. I'm not sure which groups you guys are, but you guys were the top two scorers. So good job, especially. Dr. Lupo did particularly well as well. So more reason to listen to your professor. Um, so yeah, we'll take a look at the Dynacast for the period. Overall, a pretty warm period stretching most of the eastern and southern half of the country and west as well, aside from one area of California that I believe was receiving quite a bit of rainfall, if I'm not mistaken. So a little tough to predict that if you were going for a warmer California. A little bit of a surprise, at least to me, was the cooler temps in the northern tier here. I wasn't really expecting it to get I'm not going to say cold, but on the chillier side. I don't know if I would consider that a colder air mass. But at least it helped temper Chicago down to around normal HDD production. So it could have been a lot warmer without that. So always there's always a wrench in these things. So moving on now to the 500 millibar pattern. Looks like that ridge that's been there in northern Canada for the past, it seems like month at this point. It's moved a little bit more to the west than in previous weeks, but it's still there. That strong low in the Gulf of Alaska, back into the Aleutians, still going actually a little bit stronger. Not as much into the west coast as in last week, but still quite strong. And we'll take a look now to see how our models did at predicting this. So looking at the euro first, I've had a sneak peek, so I know which one did a little bit better. The euro got that low pretty well, not as strong in the Aleutians area as it would appear to be. But got the Gulf of Alaska part right, and I think that counts a little bit more for our weather pattern. The location of the high, the euro has it centered over Hudson Bay. It's a little further to the northwest of that. I can't fault it too much for that. It is a 16 to 20 day forecast, but still, it has the ridge in the correct area. So, we give it points for that as well. And it has a little bit of a low just south of Greenland. That didn't really materialize, and it also missed the trothiness along the eastern seaboard. So a little bit of a minus there for that, but overall not too bad of a 500 millibar pattern for the euro. And now the CFS, you might notice, is a little bit different. So right off the bat, we see it doesn't have that high over Canada whatsoever. It's kind of split it off, if you will, into two separate entities, one just south of Greenland and a pretty strong ridge along the western half of the country with a pretty strong trough in the eastern half of the country. That doesn't really materialize with what actually happened. You can see there's no strong ridge in the west. There is a trough in the east, but not nearly. This is kind of a shallow trough, if you will. Maybe even you could call it just a closed low kind of situation. That's a pretty deep trough here, and would be if this was January, I'd be saying gear up for a nor'easter, or maybe even a couple of feet of snow for somebody. But that clearly didn't happen. And then as well, the ridging south of Greenland, there's a little bit of ridging, but not nearly to the strength that is shown by the CFS. So overall, I would say the CFS did pretty poorly for this period and was bested by the euro, which I think did pretty well for this period. With that being said, the scores also kind of reflect that. CFS at 55 with a minus score. The EC was at 34, a little too warm, but still positive score, well within the spread. And, not too far off for the HDD season anyway, where things get a little wild, so even in the early stages. So with that being said, does anyone have any questions or comments about this particular period or this forecast?
The on my end, Steve, the only thing that struck me was, can you pull up that the five? You had the 500 millibar verification the last 5 days. Yeah, this guy.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting because, and then what was what was the HDD observation again for this period?
It was I think it was 41.7.
Which was well below
41.6.
right.
Yeah,
Then,
yeah.
And then now go back to the 500 one more time. Sorry. This struck me, but maybe it's not that big of a deal. And then can you pull up the do you have like I know we're not getting into the forecast yet, but it struck me. Do you have like the forecast like the model forecast up somewhere? Or could you pull it up?
Yeah, I can pull it up. I'm
Like
assuming for our current period, the current forecast period that we're
just
going
like the
for.
composites. Go to the composite page on the Maxar. Yeah, then switch it to like 500 millibar heights, please.
Yeah. Heights. Yeah, we'll look at 11 to 15.
And then just click on one of those images. Just if you blow it up, it'll.
Let's do this one. This one looks fun.
There you go. And then, okay, so go to the 6 to 10. Yeah, then like global view, like you had on the other page. I think global view does it.
Here we go.
So, okay, so I guess what struck me, and I know a lot of you weren't on last week's call, but I remember, I think it was last week's call, Michael can correct me, but the ridge up in northern Canada struck me in the pattern in general. I know it's not a perfect match to the last 5 days, but the last 5 days verified very warm, basis normal in terms of HDDs. And again, big kind of ridge up there in northern Canada, somewhat. And the 6 to 10 day period that Michael's showing here is projected to be relatively cool, basis normal, like much colder than the 30-year, I believe, in terms of HDDs. And I remember, I think it was Dave Darkangelo who was on, who's not with us this week, but he was, we were talking about like, why, maybe this pattern's not producing much. I think it was him. I could be wrong, but saying something like, it takes a little while to, you got to get the buildup of cold air. And that, or at least that could be part of it. That even though the pattern looked okay in terms of what verified for maybe some cold in the east, the cold air availability was limited after coming through this period of the last month or two of very, very warm temperatures. So it just struck me that, now that we've had a little time to maybe rearrange and produce some cooler air in Canada and drive that southward, maybe that's in part why, the 5 days that just verified with the height pattern we had didn't produce much cool, but the five day pattern that's projected here in the 6 to 10, is expected to produce a lot more relative coolness across the eastern half of the country. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that too, Dave. That's a good observation there. We just didn't have there's a lag between the upper levels and the surface in a situation like that where it has to kind of reconnect the cold air pipeline and start to having that transfer of air masses and everything. So yeah, Canada was so super warm. It was a lag time to get the surface to respond to that. So we're finally starting to get that here in early November. It looks like that ridge there. On this picture you're showing here, it's a little bit more towards the Northwest Territories, but for next week it's going to be over the Yukon as well, and I've been calling it a Yukon Ridge. I was looking back at, and then it goes away here. Maybe it's more than 1 to 5 day, but I was looking back at the historical examples of this. There it is, the Yukon Ridge. I looked back at all years back to 1950 in late October and early November for a repeat of something similar to this, a Yukon Ridge. And the last time we had one like this in a La Nina, at the same time window was 1995. So what an interesting winter that was. High volatility, lots of crazy storminess, and a cold U.S. winter. So it'll be interesting to see if we see this kind of reoccurrence theme here. It's a kind of interesting little snippet there. It also happened in 2002, 1970, 1951. It only happened 4 times in the last several decades. So kind of neat.
Now, most of these guys don't remember that winter or don't are like, why is he bringing it up? But I will just say that the winter of 95, 96 produced the greatest snowstorm I've ever witnessed, and one of the
Yeah.
greatest in New Jersey in the Northeast history, where we
Yep.
received something on the order of 30 inches of snow. And to get 30 inches of snow in central New Jersey is a miracle, takes a miracle. So that was a crazy event. Yes.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I've only seen 30 inches of snow once, and it was during the Boxing Day blizzard where I got one of the mezzo bands set up over my house and got some 4 inch per hour snow rates. That was a fun one, but um, back on topic. um, so in the interest of time, I know this is always a great discussion, but we want to make sure we get to all the students before they have to leave. So we're gonna put that on pause for the moment and move on to the current forecast, which, if I remember, let's
We'll
see.
put it on ice, right?
Hopefully not too much ice. I don't want to lose power yet. Anyway, so just gonna give a quick overview. Looks like we have a pretty decent spread. Some of the persistences are quite warm. The EC also quite warm with only 81 HDDs. A couple of colder forecasts, Matt Rogers, Dr. Lupo, some of the moving averages on our higher end with a lot of people in the middle. So without further ado, Matt Rogers, if you'd like to give your example forecast for the students, and to the students, I recommend highly that you pay very close attention to the way Matt Rogers delivers his forecast. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, this was a difficult forecast because the pattern was changing. The pattern is changing. But when I made the forecast on Tuesday, you could see signs that the pattern was changing. But the big question was, will the new revised pattern persist into that key 16 to 20-day period? So I went back and forth on this forecast. It was a difficult one, but I ended up leaning slightly to the colder side. It looks like Dr. Lupo did as well, and Dave D'Arcangelo did too. And it's a challenging one, but essentially, the bottom line is what I would tell a trader right now is that I'm leaning a little bit colder for the 16 to 20-day period versus normal. However, there is a tremendous amount of volatility, very high standard deviation in these types of weather patterns to kind of prepare them for the risk of a lot of back and forth forecast guidance, a lot of back and forth signals that they're going to see over the next few weeks with this pattern type. A lot of the analog years that look really close to this year, the super warm 2007 of October, also, the 2008 is showing up, getting a little bit of a few other years in the mix there too. And they generally, like 95 I mentioned earlier, but they generally show a lot of back and forth variability in November. So it's going to be like trying to catch a falling knife, but there will be cold periods, I think, and we're going to see that here next week already. But there's also going to be some warmer transient periods too. So my best estimate is the 92 HDD that I came up with for this forecast, and I kind of based it on the continuation of higher heights along the West Coast, the positive P&A trends that have been showing up, despite the wobbling in the Gulf of Alaska low, and then also some of the extended range guidance, which hasn't honestly been doing that well lately. They missed this cool push for the first week of November, but I looked at them, like we talked about last time, more in the 500 millibar range rather than the surface temperatures, which tend to be tended not to respond to pattern shifts. So that's the bottom line right now. Anyone have any questions?
So I have a more broad question, not necessarily about the forecast, but so you mentioned a lot of volatility in this period, and it sounds like a lot of volatility coming up in November. Do you have any recommendations for the students on A, how to deal with that volatility in their forecasts, but B, how to, tell that to a client without kind of scaring them too much.
Well, yeah, I think you have to be honest with them, though. I don't think in a situation
Right.
like this you can't sugarcoat it, I suppose. But you do want to give them the read that you have on it. I actually did a nice line chart for the customers last week showing all the La Niñas Novembers that are kind of in the range of expectations that we're in right now, and it just showed the daily heating degree day fluctuations among them, 2007, 2005, 2017 most recently, and it's just amazing all the up and downs there. And to try to catch a 5-day window is going to be challenging. I do have a bottom line net thought though, and I've been telling the clients that we do expect this November to be significantly colder than last November because it's really fascinating. But we've kind of switched the narrative from last year. Last year we had a cold October and a super warm November. It was the second warmest on record or third warmest on record. This year the narrative has switched, and now October was a top 3 or 2 warm. It was the second warmest October on record as well. And now this November is going to be looking volatile with a marginal lean to the slightly colder than 30-year normal side. So I kind of give them that kind of bottom line. And even if, like I was talking to Dave earlier, if I get the 11 to 15 day wrong or the 16 to 20 day wrong, it's almost one of those, wait and you'll see it on the other side of it or ahead of it. So it's just a lot of temporal challenges here, even if we've got a general handle on the big picture. Some fundamental things have changed. The tropical force in MJO has started moving into some new areas. It's going back towards Southeast Asia, where we had that happen, and some of these other cases I've mentioned, 2007, 2008 especially. We're seeing a significant shift in that Yukon Ridge that wasn't there before. The retrograde, it was over the Hudson Bay most of October. Now it's retrograding to the Yukon area. It's going to progress back toward the Hudson Bay again. We're going to get a Gulf of Alaska low in place, and now the Gulf of Alaska low is going to break down, it looks like, by the end of the 11:15 day. I didn't see that back on Tuesday, but it makes me feel a little bit better about my forecast now. But so there's definitely a lot of challenges in this pattern in the forecast, and it depends on the trader and the customer. Yeah, some really want to get into the weeds, and some have already hung up like 5 minutes ago. So, and they're ready. They got their bottom line. They're done. So volatility, colder lean, done. That's all they need. Others want your backstory to get a sense of your confidence in the forecast because they talk to a lot of different weather forecasters, and so they want to get a sense of where each of their guidance is coming from. Basically, it's almost like if you could interview the European model or interview the GFS model and find out what they're thinking and how they came up with their forecasts. Is what the traders like to do. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind asking the CFS where it gets some of its numbers sometimes.
Yeah, I know, right?
Thank you, Matt. That was great and very helpful. All right, so I see a couple of student groups here. Does anyone want to volunteer before I start picking names? I think did I see a volunteer? Okay. Which forecast were you guys?
I'm part of group Lauren Savoy.
Okay. Let me just see. Let me just get this open. Okay. And the floor is yours.
Okay, so we had a mean of 91 with a spread of 7, but I know that's really low. To be honest, I think that was a typo. I don't think it was meant to be that low. But I guess that's what we're rolling with. So we went to get our starting point. We always start with the 10 and 30-year averages. And then for this forecast, we put most of our weight on the GFS extended model because looking at the model verification page on Maxar, I believe it said that that model had been performing better than the others over the past month. And then we also looked at the CFS too, I believe. We put a little bit of that weight on that as well. And what those were saying, it looked like to have they had a cold, I guess, prediction over most of the east and northeast of the country, with most of the rest of the country being pretty close to or just above normal when it came to HDDs, with warmth that could stretch into the eastern or northeastern part of the country. So the GFS and CPC seem to agree pretty well on that. And so that's what we like highlighted in our map that I believe. And then yes, I actually think the map is supposed to be flipped as well. I believe we messed up on the map too. So the red should be blue and blue should be red for this map. And we've been pretty much just based our forecast on, like I said, a little bit with the averages for our starting point, and then whatever the models were predicting that seemed to have pretty well agreement with each other. And then yeah, just looked at the temperature averages for some of the previous weeks of the month to see how, like, where we've been, and to see if the pattern will keep its pace with what we think was going to happen, which was cooler in the western part of the country and normal towards the Midwest of the country, and warmer in the northeast part of the country.
Okay. Anyone have any comments, questions for
I like
this
the one answer that really stood out to me of that discussion was just that you picked the GFS extended, which I think was the GFS on weeklies. You picked that because it was the better performer over the past month, and clients like to they like to hear that you're keeping score and you're focusing on the better performers and things, and that's a good rationale to decide on a forecast. It doesn't always work because one model may be handling one pattern better than the other, and then if you switch patterns, it changes gears. But that is a great credible answer, I think, and that really stood out to me that you picked one of the better performing guidance to work with there. So that was good.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
I'm Alex.
Alex, sorry, Alex. This is Dave. Yeah, I thought. Actually, before I get into this, is it my eyes or is anyone else seeing a blurry screen?
It's a little blurry.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to know how bad my eyes are. Okay. No, Alex, I agree with Matt. Like, good job. Like, I thought it was a good presentation in general, and I liked your opening in terms of. I thought that was very. It's just a good point. I mean, it's a legitimate thing to say, hey, these were our data points, and the reason why I went with the GFS extension is because it's been the best performer in the last 30 days, or something like that. Like that's a very reasonable explanation, right? Like, you have a good defense, evidence for support for your forecast and all that kind of jazz. So that's good. And in terms of the what's that?
Oh, I just said good work, guys.
Yeah. And I was going to say too, with the spread, just we can change that too, as long as we change that before verification. So if you send me an email or just let me know what you want it to be, we can change that. And I was just thinking too, and I know we're not making this. It's not exactly like you're in a real scenario here, but like if you ever see something like that. You could handle it similar to how you handled it, I think, in terms of like if you wrote something in a report that was wrong, say, hey, listen, I see I put a high temperature in Phoenix of 35. That's a mistake. I think we had something closer to 90, and I'll get you that as soon as I get back to my desk. Something, you might do something like that, right? Because those things are going to happen, and they can be embarrassing. But I think if you handle it, if you handle it responsibly, it's not that bad, and it's not that big of a deal. So and I think you kind of handled it that way. And I thought that was good too. So those are my only comments.
Okay. Thank you. Would the next group like to? Who? Anyone else want to volunteer?
Oh, by the way, it's much clearer now. Or at least something. Maybe I hit my head against the wall. I don't know.
I think it refocused finally. We can go next. 5 guys.
5 guys. Let me just find you in here. Okay. Um, there. Floor is yours.
So as you can see, we had a temperature of that
83.0.
83.0 and a spread of 12.5. We actually forecasted a little warmer, which we were pretty confident about at the time, but it's interesting that the rest of the forecast groups have actually gone colder. We actually were kind of agreed that we were having the same challenges. It was mainly a timing issue. We saw that 500 millibar pattern, and we were looking at a ridge over in the west and a trough over in the east, but there was a lot of disagreement as to where that axis would be. We looked at primarily, as we have before, we started with climatology and then went to the Dynacast and the CPC to kind of see how far warm or cool off of the 30 and 10-year normals we would be looking. And then after that, we looked at some of the model data to see what would be most likely to mess up the forecast. From the Dynacast, we saw warmer in the west, right?
No, it was warmer in the east. I think cooler
Yes.
in the west.
Warmer in the east, cooler in the west. But I noticed, we all noticed that kind of disagreed with the CPC, which had the entire,
What was that at first? I can't remember how it went. I know the CPC had colder west, warmer east.
I think they both agreed that it was going to be cooler. There it is, yeah. It was going to be cooler on the west, and then on the east is where the big disagreement was. The CPC had it warmer all over the east, whereas the Dynacast had it warmer in the northeast, but cooler in the southeast, right?
A little bit
Yes.
more average than south.
So there was a lot of disagreement with that. And then when we looked at the models as well to see what could be messed up, they were in disagreement as well. So we weren't super confident in our forecast. But with that being said, we ended up kind of saying that everything was going to be fairly close to normal, except the only thing where almost everyone agreed was that it was going to be cooler in the Midwest.
Is this, by the way, sorry, is your name Eric?
I'm Clayton.
Clayton, sorry, Clayton. I was just
Yeah.
thinking, if you want, since I think we have a little bit of extra time, I know you guys got confused about a couple points there. You want to do like a little bit of a redo here and just, just like kind of go through the motions, but just try to clear up the couple of misstatements there?
Yeah, sure, we can do that. So we'll start over. This is group 5, guys. My name's Clayton. For our forecast, we had a temperature of 83 and a spread of 12.5. We used the same process we had used before. It's been successful for the past few weeks. So with that, we began with the 10 and 30-year averages, and then we used the Dynacast, HTD, and CPC outlook to go warmer or cooler off of the averages based on what those resources provide. The average that we have was 87.5, and then we actually decided to go warmer. Both of the Dynacast and the CPC indicated a slightly warmer than normal outlook. With that being said, there was a lot of uncertainty and disagreement between the models, the Dynacast and the CPC, particularly with the timing of the ridge trough pattern and where the axis would be. The only place that there was agreement all around was that the West Coast would probably be slightly cooler than normal, but on the East, there was disagreement as to whether the warm air would be limited solely to the Southeast or whether it be the Northeast as well. With that being said, we found that overall it would probably be a slightly warmer than normal forecast.
Yeah, I thought that was much better. Yeah, nice. Just on my end, I liked how you distinguished. I liked how you talked about the risks there, and like how there's these risks in the West, and then there's different risks in the East, and I guess you were talking about the Southeast in particular. But that's also can be really important. I suspect Matt would agree. It's like breaking out where the regional risks are, because depending on who your end user is or stakeholder is, they may have more sensitivities as a function of region. They may have very sensitive trading position or something in the Southeast, but not so much in the West. So they can really utilize that information. So I really liked how you did that. I liked, I thought it was interesting. It's funny what you brought up. And again, I think Matt can appreciate this too. I definitely can. How you brought up, when we made the forecast, we were really confident, but now, we're not quite as confident based on how things are and how things have evolved over the last week. Boy, if I had a nickel for every time I've said something like that or something like that's happened where things look great, and then a few days later, the models flipped on you or something like that, or just got more volatile. So I think that's a very normal reaction. And beyond that, I think, I know we're not doing this every day, where in situations where, like, for example, where you might issue a December forecast, and then as it gets closer, you have to, update your December forecast. And so, it might start really warm, and then all of a sudden you see things that change. But I liked how you were self-aware of those. And I think traders and whoever your end users are going to be appreciative of that too. And last, but I think maybe the most important point here is that I think, having an open mind and be able to adapt to conditions on the ground, so to speak, I think is maybe one of the most important traits to have, i.e. don't get stuck in your initial, from a December forecast you made in August, if things have changed. I think in the long run, you will be much more successful if you if you bite the bullet and just say, you know what, things have changed. My forecast is a little bit colder, and here's why. So that's all I had.
That's very good, Dave. Yeah, I've learned that lesson the hard way a number of times. So yeah, definitely adjust with the changing information that you see and you're given. So, but anyway, I agree with all the other points Dave made too, and great delivery, Clayton. That was really good. It was very efficient, to the point, and very very quick. So I thought that was all good.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. I believe we've got, I want to say, 2 groups left. We've got the derechos, and I think there's someone else in there. Maybe only one group left. So is there a representative from the derechos that would like to go next? If there are any derechos in the building.
Sure. Yeah,
Here.
is there one?
No, it's only.
It's only 3 of the 5 guys, and then 2 are for Lauren.
Well, Sarah had a family emergency, so she couldn't come today. So
Okay, understandable. So if we have no derechos, I assume, I think that's it for our student groups. Do any of the students have any questions about this upcoming forecast, about something we discussed earlier, or, in general? Okay, well, we have.
Oh,
yeah.
Just to piggyback on that, do you guys find this process helpful? And the reason I ask, just, in terms of like with the briefings and stuff, and really focusing in on the communications, and, even in some situations, giving you guys a chance to do overs and stuff like that. Do you think this is something we should continue to do, or what are your thoughts on that? If we can kind of go around.
I think it helps a lot with kind of bringing the story together, especially the feedback that you give us to help us, be able to present that better. And I like just how it's been going. I think that's been pretty conducive to kind of helping us get better at putting our forecasts together and presenting them. So.
I agree with that. I also think it's pretty cool to see like some of your guys' views and what you guys look at whenever you guys are making your forecasts. It's kind of cool to see how you guys explain it and what impacts they do. So it's kind of nice having other people's viewpoints other than just our own groups of what we do. So we can kind of expand on what we do, hopefully create a better forecast.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's not as easy as it looks. I always think, I've always found it's still frightening for me, like giving, public speaking, right? Basically, even if it's in front of 2 people, 5 people, 10 people, it always seems easier than it is. Like even, what Clayton went through there, it's all of a sudden it's like, wow, there's a lot of information, a lot of data, and you're trying to, communicate it as clearly and quickly as possible. It's a messy process. So yeah, that's why we'll try to, keep on that and give you guys, just more practice and such. Cool. Sorry about that, Michael. Back over to you.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that point, Dave, about the public speaking is, I always found that because back in my when I was in class, I had to do these weather briefings, go through the all the different weather phenomena of the day, start at 200, work my way down to the surface. And I always found that it was a lot easier for me, nerves and all to kind of go through that a couple of times, before actually, making the presentation. And I think the same thing applies here. That if I'm not saying one of you guys needs to volunteer as tribute every week. You could rotate it. You could do whatever you want with it. But I think if one of you decides like, hey, I'm going to be the one presenting this week, I think it would help uh, a lot. Just in between the nerves and just getting everything out quickly and clearly. If you went over what you're planning on saying once or twice, you don't have to write anything down. I mean, if you want to, that's totally fine too. I'm more of a wing it kind of guy, but um, if you want note cards, go for that. Whatever helps you to be more comfortable presenting. Because we don't want you guys to be uncomfortable while you're doing this. But B, it'll help you. Like, if you get a job with somebody like, say you're working for Matt Rogers one day, you want to be able to, you don't want to be stumbling over your words while presenting to clients. You're not going to get that do-over with the clients usually. you know, uh, and I've, in discussions with Dave, he helped me with this a lot too. Some clients will be a little bit short on time and they might be a little bit rude and be like, okay, get to the point. They'll just tell you to essentially shut up and tell me what your number is. And that's something that, you got to get used to, and preparation can help with that a lot. So that's my 2 cents to that. Uh, that being said, does anyone have any other questions or thoughts about this particular period before I move back to what we were discussing earlier and put on ice, so to speak?
Yeah, Michael, your point though about practicing is, I think that's really important. I think the more you do something, the more comfortable you get at doing it. But also when I have to give talks to at conferences or things like that, it really helps me to kind of go over my material beforehand and really just I do practice it. I give the speech to myself and talk through it and everything, because then I can catch logical errors. I'll catch things that or I'll get into a groove of what I'm talking about, that I feel really comfortable about what I'm giving and the topic. And once you get really comfortable with your content, then you can add to it. You can make it more interesting, whatever you need to do. But it does help to do that. And for me, and the
Uh,
telephone.
okay.
Did you lose me?
For a second, yeah.
Oh, sorry. The wind is really crazy over here. Sorry about that. I'm in Delaware. We're getting
Yeah.
slammed. Um, so yeah, so I would give the same spiel over and over again to traders on the phone back in the day when the phones were ringing off the hook, when before we had the internet being the big thing. So it's just, but you would practice it. You would say, you would have your spiel, you would have your message to deliver, and but I I agree completely that practice is really a big win to help you get more comfortable with that.
Yeah, and then I'll just even add one more little anecdote. Something my dad always told me, because he had to do public speaking a lot. Uh, he would say to always be prepared to speak, because you don't know when, because he would tell me these stories about these times he wasn't scheduled to speak, but then about 5 minutes before they're like, hey, why don't you go up and say a couple of words, and he was always prepared for that after the first time when he wasn't too prepared. So he relayed that message to me, and that's, I always thought that was a good piece of advice. All right, so with about, I'm guessing, 10 to 15 minutes left, we can go back to our verification and kind of pick up on what we were talking about earlier, which was couple of things, the the overall warmth of the period, but also the cold that is about to follow. Dave, I believe you had a couple of thoughts on this period.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with Matt and actually Clayton earlier. Just as in terms of general thoughts, yeah, I felt like the forecast is, it's sometimes it feels like right for a couple months you're on cruise control. I don't know if anyone else gets that feeling, but it seemed like a couple point, it seemed like I felt like we were a little bit more in that, and now it seems like we're having that, things are being shook up a little bit. So yeah, I mean, the bottom line was in terms of my forecast today, what I do, I have a sort of a formula that I've kind of derived that you can see on the board there. It's kind of a mix of the different normals and some weighting on the model inputs, and then a little bit of weighting on the MJO input that we have, our little statistical input. And I have sort of a different formula for the summer and winter. And we're in a transition season right now, right? Coming out of summer into winter. So yeah, and a lot of this is still somewhat subjective and stuff. I don't have like an algorithm, that every day changes it slightly. But with that, I've been adjusting my formula from the summer to the winter. So that's something I noted in my my formula and strategy. And I should add here that so what's the difference? What I do in the summer, what I found, again, some of this based just experientially, and some of this is, I think, a fair amount of objective data too. In the summer, we've seen, at least for what we're forecasting, continental United States, sort of population weighted in the summer, CDDs in the summer, and gas weighted in the winter, that there's been a more significant trend in the summer than there has been in the winter. So that's what I bring into my formula. So in the summer, I put a lot of weight on more short-term climatology information, like the 10-year trend, things like that. In the winter, I kind of pull back toward the 30-year. And I also use a little bit more of the model weightings and things like that. So that's sort of where I'm at. There's two different times of the year. And then I do allow for a little bit of, sort of subjective sort of fudge factor, I like to call it sometimes, like plus or minus 5 or 10 from my absolute formula. And over the last month or so, I've been warming, I guess, adding a warm, depending if it was CDDs, adding CDDs, and now in HD taken off a little bit. But I've been warming the forecast based on some of the recent trends. But I think what I've noted this week, and I think I started doing it last week too, was based on more uncertainty into the forecast in terms of where we're going, I've pulled out any kind of fudge factor or reduced my fudge factor almost to zero. And I probably, again, the last thing I'll say is, even since I made that forecast just a few days ago, Tuesday, right? And today's Friday, I probably would just wipe out any fudge factor, like Clayton says here, kind of, my uncertainty in terms of where things are going, and just an observation on where the forecast spread is, right? We've got some warm forecasts, we've got some cool forecasts, and that gives me pause too in terms of what's on folks' mind. So that's kind of a long-winded sort of explanation in terms of sort of my forecast process and sort of what's in my head right now. Any questions?
Yeah, Dave, I have a question. So what kind of signals would you need to kind of be more comfortable bringing that fudge factor back? Like, like a -3 sigma NAO, or maybe like a super negative EPO, or what would you need to bring that fudge factor back?
I tell you, no, it's funny because just a little bit about me in terms of my forecast process. I'm always torn. It's like I need a psychiatrist to because there's part of me that says the more objective, researchy part of me says, Dave, don't ever put in something that's subjective unless you have hard data to support it. Like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. if you can't back it up, if you can't, whatever. And then the other more experiential part of me says, I've seen this, and I know I don't have time to do a study to prove it, but it's there and I have to do it. So I just want you guys to understand the torment that I go through every time I make a forecast. And I always say, like, I'm never going to do a fudge factor again, but then I do a fudge factor and I go back and forth. But I would say with all that said, a couple of things. So one, I think anytime you can have some sort of quantitative information to defend, hey, I'm going away from the EC, I think that's really helpful. But the things that I've seen, a lot of this experientially, like I try to go with things that even if it's not fully objective, that where the science suggests that there's faults in the model. So in other words, where are the limitations? Where are the warts in the ECM, WF, and the CFS? And I think one area that's been exposed by a number of groups still, that they're not perfect, is tropical forcing, right? Tropical forcing, MGO, things like that. The models still generally have a difficult time initializing and propagating some of those signals, i.e. that there can be significant errors, especially as you get beyond day 1 and 2, like where we're forecasting days 15 and 20 and 25 and so on. So that's one of that's probably the area I look at the most. And if I see certain signals there that experientially it says, hey, I think it might be missing something, I'll more likely add a fudge factor. And the way I get there a lot of times, we have different analytics as part of the forecast, MGO analytics, like where we've done composites and stuff, lag composites. You guys are aware of some of this stuff. I won't try to share it right now, just for the sake of time, but some of this stuff we actually have available, and some of it's, you can find on, different pages and stuff like that. But the bottom line is you can look at these lag composites from MGO and other tropical forcing. And what I'll do is I'll compare that in certain situations to what the models are showing. And if I see a big enough discrepancy, that's the kind of situation where I might say, tropical forcing and some of the lag composites, et cetera, suggest forecast should be well below normal. The models are suggesting something normal. And I'll try to take some sort of compromise between them. And again, that's where I'll say, and a lot of times you'll see me write it up such like this, I'm going about 5 HDDs lower than the dynamic guidance. And the reason is because I'm incorporating sort of quantitative information about the MGO. Beyond the MGO, beyond tropical forcing, I would say, some folks do the same kind of thing with stratospheric forcing. Now, obviously, this is more in the heart of winter, Nov, and in particular, Tishan Feb into March. But I know some folks, and myself to some degree, think that the same kind of limitations we talked about, the errors and maybe systematic errors that exist with tropical forcing also exist between coupling between the stratosphere and troposphere, i.e. if you see a certain setup in the stratosphere, stratospheric warming, cool, whatever, you might say, you know what, I think the models are underestimating the impact it's going to have. Thus, I'm going to apply some sort of fudge factor. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just add on, that because you mentioned, you kind of change your forecast with the seasons, or at least your forecast methodology. I do something similar, with the summer or the CDD season in general. I lowered my teleconnections influence down to 10%. I think I forget what I usually have it at. I think it's 30 or 40%. I can't remember the exact number. It's been a while, but because usually, the teleconnections don't have as big an impact, during the summer months as they do during the winter months. And usually, the 10-year, which I use as part of my forecast, usually the 10-year performs pretty well during the summer months as well. And, so it makes sense to change your forecast with the seasons if you have things like I do, teleconnections in the 10-year that perform better in different seasons. So that being said, I'll probably be upping the teleconnections in the coming weeks back up to its normal value as we get closer. I think we're almost to December, where teleconnections are king, and I'll be looking for that perfect setup of negative NAO and positive PNAs and all those other fun teleconnections to hopefully not only get some cold, but a nice big snowstorm that I'm sure everyone's hoping for. All right, so we got a couple of minutes left here. Does anyone have any closing thoughts, any closing comments on anything?
I was just I've been tracking this new European ensemble that's coming in while we've had this meeting, and for updates and things, and it's really interesting. I think if I remember correctly, our 16 to 20 day from Tuesday was like the 10th through the 14th. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so as of right now, the European ensemble has the first colder than normal day in the U.S. from a national gas weighted HD perspective this coming Monday, the 1st, and then the last day is Tuesday, the 9th. So the first day it flips back warmer thanks to that flip in the Alaska low coming back is Wednesday, November 10th. So it looks like the Clayton warmer team there is in the pole position at this moment. So you just don't want this to slow down at any way, shape, or form. As long as it holds on to where it's at today, you'll be the winner. So we'll have to see how this goes over the weekend and everything. The one thing that's been happening over the last few days is that it keeps delaying the progression of the pattern. The models tend to break down ridges too quickly, so that Yukon ridge, they keep trying to break it down too quickly. So it may bleed into that period. But it's so funny because I had a colder end of October as well, and I missed it by 5 days. It's going to be the 1st through the 5th instead of the 27th through the 31st. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that's the hard part about this game. You can miss these periods by just a couple of days, and it can mess up the whole forecast.
Yep, get the pattern right, the timing wrong. Yeah.
For what it's worth, it looks like the GFS ensembles they're a little colder than they were yesterday, but only by a couple of HDDs. The EC ensembles look like a little scattered on the 11 to 15, but looks like the 6 to 10 got a little bit colder, and the Canadian ensembles.
That one's really cold. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked at this earlier and was kind of
one-
surprised to see how cold this was, but
yeah.
wouldn't mind seeing this in January. But
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
but yeah, so we'll have to see how that we'll have to see which one of the models winds up being correct at the end of the day. Interesting to see the CFS is not the coldest forecast. That's one for the record books these days.
Yeah.
But we'll see. It'll be an interesting forecast, and so well, we're about out of time here. So thanks guys for coming. Great job with the presentations. Thank you, Matt, for your insights. Great as always. And have a great weekend. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hopefully no one loses power on the East Coast.
Yeah, hope not. All right, have a good weekend. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
I guess.
Bye, guys.